So, listen to this. In 2006, after repeatedly telling a younger player to pass the ball, only for him to carry on dribbling like a headless chicken, Van Nistelrooy lost his cool, squared up to the kid, and kicked him. Quickly, Rio Ferdinand ran towards them, trying to stop it all, and it was absolute chaos. First, Van Nistelrooy swung a punch at Rio and then yelled at the kid, "What are you gonna do? Go cry to your daddy?" And instantly, everyone stopped and just stared at him in shock. The kid's dad had just passed away a few months earlier. That kid was Cristiano Ronaldo. Van Nistelrooy tried to explain that he wasn't actually referring to his father but to their second coach Carlos Queiroz, but it was too late. That day, Sir Alex Ferguson decided that, despite Ruud being quite arguably the best striker in the club's history, averaging a goal or assist every 99 minutes for 5 straight seasons, at times making even Thierry Henry's numbers look average, he had to kick him out the club. And his legacy never recovered. No matter how many times his old teammates came back claiming that he would have broken every record at Man United, check any list of the Premier League's all-time greats, and while his biggest rival will be standing at the top, when it comes to Van Nistelrooy, nothing. Ask any fans what they think of him and you'll only hear one thing: he was just a poacher. No matter how absurd of a claim that is to make regarding a guy who at one point was the Champions League's top assist provider, a guy who, when needed, could dribble past entire teams before scoring, and worse, a guy who, for the longest time, wasn't even a striker. Look, I'm not even gonna bother you with the fact that in his early academy days he played as a centre-back. The thing that really blows my mind is that it was only at 16 that a coach convinced him to try out for a proper academy, as he had no intention of doing so, and even once he did drive out to a couple trials, not only was he rejected by PSV, but once he landed at second tier Den Bosch, he was a midfielder and he'd stayed that way for 5 years. Over his entire third season as a pro, he only scored 2 goals, and even after playing somewhat further down the pitch the next season, the only interest Van Nistelrooy was attracting was from the likes of Coventry City and Aston Villa. Meanwhile, Kluivert, who was born on the same day as him, had already scored in the Champions League final 2 seasons before and was now moving to AC Milan. He could have never imagined Van Nistelrooy would be the man who'd kill his national team career just a few years later. That season, instead of taking whichever mediocre offers he got from England, instead, Van Nistelrooy joined Heerenveen, where legendary manager Foppe de Haan had a plan for him. Before the season started, he told him, "I think you're a natural striker." Shocked, Van Nistelrooy went, No, sorry coach, I'm a midfielder and number 10, but it didn't matter. De Haan had made up his mind. He began putting in extra hours coaching Van Nistelrooy, even driving him to Amsterdam anytime the national team played, so he could teach him to imitate Bergkamp's movements. He ran him so ragged, one day Van Nistelrooy lost his temper and shouted at him, "What am I, a midfielder or a striker? What do I need to do?" And he replied, "You need to stop chasing the ball, you need to wait for it like a lion in the savannah. Then, I believe he could score a few goals." And he certainly did. 22 goal contributions in his first ever season as a proper striker. Suddenly, after 2 years looking for a Ronaldo replacement, PSV believed Van Nistelrooy was their man, and so, less than a year after moving clubs for a mere 360,000 euros, he moved again for 6.3 million, the all-time record in the Netherlands. But as much as Bobby Robson insisted he was a star in the making, the overall consensus was that this was a mistake, that they had sold their 5 best players and dumped half that money on some random guy, and after 14 games with only 5 wins and 5 goals for Van Nistelrooy, he had Van der Kerkhoff, a club legend and European champion, outright calling him the biggest mistake in the club's history. So he knew what he had to do. The day after those comments, Van Nistelrooy scored a hat-trick before the halftime break. In his own words, Van der Kerkhoff's company had one of the sponsors' boxes at the stadium, and as we walked off, I was looking straight at him. I did every gesture except a wave. And then, Then he just kept scoring. In the 29 matches left until the end of the season, he scored in all but 5. By the end, he was on 42 goals, 31 of which in the league, their top scorer by a mile and only a few goals off the European Golden Boot, being named the Dutch Player of the Year. And still, somehow the next season, he made all of that look almost average. 12 games into that league campaign, he had already hit 3 hat-tricks and 4 braces, 19 goals in total. It was getting to the point where paying for a ticket and only getting to watch Van Nistelrooy score once felt like a disappointment. By November, he had only played 1 full 90 without scoring. Add to that 8 assists and he was averaging a goal contribution every 37 minutes for 3 months. I have literally never seen that kind of form in 5 years of making videos like this. And if that wasn't enough to get the fans to worship him like a king, then it just so happened that their 2 league matches against rivals Ajax fell less than 2 months off of each other, and guess what Van Nistelrooy did? He scored a hat-trick in the first and then did it again in the second. After that, with Sir Alex's son Darren going on trial at multiple clubs in the Netherlands, he stopped to watch PSV and immediately called his father telling him he has got to sign this Van Nistelrooy right away. So once Sir Alex's brother Martin got Bobby Robson, now at Newcastle, to confide in him that if I had the money, I'd have bought him yesterday, the whole family was being deployed like the Avengers. Except that then, Van Nistelrooy went off to a friendly match, went up for a bicycle kick, and by the time he hit the ground, he had blown out his knee. At first, the club doctors claimed it was fine, so much so that 2 months later, a deal was agreed with Man United for £19 million, bound to break the British transfer record. But the day of the presentation, some sources say a mere 45 minutes before he was to be brought out to the press, after all the examinations and scans in the world, one final doctor took a look at his knee and insisted it had not healed. United began demanding that he go under the knife, but afraid of missing the Euros, Van Nistelrooy refused. And so, his presentation became instead an announcement that the transfer had been cancelled. In the words of his agent, before we were literally joking that we'd kill the doctor if he ruined the deal. Then, Ruud's world collapsed. But the funny thing about hitting rock bottom is that, really, it can always get worse. So, the very following day, Van Nistelrooy went in for a training session, and this happened. His ACL was now fully gone. No Man United and no Euros. At least he had built up enough of a lead for both himself and his club that he still took the league title as the top scorer and player of the year. But no matter what, when he watched his massive lead for the European Golden Boot disappear, losing out on it by a single goal, man, I cannot imagine. Regardless, after 13 months out, when Van Nistelrooy finally made it back, even if everyone was against the transfer, claiming it was far too risky to spend all that money on an unproven player just coming out of a massive injury, Sir Alex didn't listen and put his money back on the table, making the already 25-year-old the most expensive player in Premier League history. Still to this day, the Eredivisie's 5th biggest ever sale, and against all odds, he did it again. With 14 goals, others said that he was the best in Europe, better than Cantona, that he could score with a blindfold on. By the end of the season, he was only a goal away from beating Henry to the Golden Boots and already snatching the PFA Player of the Year award from him. Not to mention, he was also the first Premier League player to hit 10 goals in the Champions League, taking the best tally out of any player from any league since the 1970s, obviously being the competition's top scorer, but also their top assist provider with 15 goal contributions in 14 matches, leading United within one step of the final, scoring one at home and assisting another away, only to get sent packing on away goals. I can't stress this enough, this was within inches of being without a shadow of a doubt the greatest Premier League debut season of all time. With a bit of luck on his side, this was quite literally a Ballon d'Or worthy year, but instead, he finished 13, mostly on the basis that first, it was a World Cup year in which he did not even participate, and second, he was trophyless, so the next season he made sure to solve that problem. Look, the next year, Van Nistelrooy scored in every Champions League game he played, 14 goals and 3 assists despite scoring home and away against Real Madrid and still somehow getting knocked out in the quarters. Even Ronaldo and Messi would struggle to compete with those numbers. Messi's best ever two-season run was 34 goal contributions in 24 games. Van Nistelrooy had just hit 30 in 23, easily taking a second Golden Boot in a row, not to mention the UEFA Forward of the Year award. But the thing is, that wasn't a highlight of his season. You see, by March, he was still on 12 league goals, with Henry all the way up at 19 and Arsenal at the top of the league. So with 8 matches left, certainly there was nothing he could do, right? Wrong. Van Nistelrooy scored in all 8 games consecutively, matching the all-time record yet again, winning 8 points in 8 matches for his team, both securing the title and leapfrogging Henry to the Golden Boot with only 1 match left. And take note, he did it against some of the toughest opposition he could get, even aside from those 2 goals against Real Madrid, which came at the same time. In that 8-game run, he faced and scored against every team in the league's top 7 except for Chelsea. No one ever deserved the Premier League title more than that. 44 goals across all competitions to this day. No Premier League player has ever beat that. It seemed like Van Nistelrooy was about to take over the world, but then Beckham left and Ronaldo arrived. When Van Nistelrooy watched Sir Alex hand the iconic and now vacant number 7 to an 18-year-old instead of him, that's when all the chaos started. Even if Van Nistelrooy still managed to extend his record to 10 consecutive games scoring at the beginning of the season, his numbers did seem to take a bit of a hit, with Ronaldo's playstyle very obviously not suiting him as well as Beckham's, and very quickly his temper began getting out of hand. As early as September, he was already making headlines for kicking a bottle at the Netherlands national team manager and calling him a coward. A week later, he was getting caught up in the famous Battle of Old Trafford, getting Vieira sent off and then missing a game-deciding penalty in the last minute, getting mobbed by the Arsenal players the moment the whistle was sounded, and even being dragged by Wenger in the post-match conference as a cheat. And though his hat-trick a few days later meant he had reached 100 goals for United 50 games faster than Henry did for Arsenal, once back with the national team, things hit yet another boiling point, with him and Kluivert clashing and openly admitting there was only space for one of them, as Van Nistelrooy eventually got him dropped to the bench, scoring a hat-trick to clutch their qualifying playoff match, just as he hit a new career-high 6th place in the Ballon d'Or, before closing out his season with 3 braces in 3 consecutive rounds to take the FA Cup, flying back to join the Netherlands at the Euros, his first ever tournament at 28 years of age, where he not only scored 4 out of their 7 goals, effectively carrying them to the semi-finals when they had no business getting there, easily getting his name into the team of the tournament, but also freezing Kluivert out of the squad completely, not allowing him a single minute, and pretty much setting in motion the downfall of his career in one of the most humiliating ends to a rivalry in history, which, I guess, warranted him some bad karma. Having just been knocked out of the Euros thanks to his teenage rival's man-of-the-match performance, now with Rooney joining him at United, it was already quite clear that a rebuild was about to take shape. Van Nistelrooy quickly got underway, proving the kids had nothing on him by putting down 13 goal contributions in the opening 14 matches, scoring the goal that ended Arsenal's 49-match unbeaten run as revenge for what had happened the previous season, and completely taking over the Champions League as per usual. But then, in December, he almost tore his Achilles tendon and went out for 3 months. They rushed him back in time to face AC Milan in the last 16, but it was clear he still wasn't fit, and even if, miraculously, he'd still finished as the Champions League's top scorer thanks to his 8 goals in 6 group stage matches, the warning signs were there already. No matter how fiercely he fought anyone who tried to put him down, at one point, famously being laughed at after missing a penalty for the Netherlands, only to score 6 minutes later, run straight to the player who left, and celebrate in front of him. Well, even with 21 goal contributions in the league's first 23 matches a week later, Sir Alex benched him for the League Cup final, and he lost it, verbally attacking the entire technical staff and being benched for 6 consecutive matches as punishment, watching Henry fly past him towards the Golden Boot, and right before the final match of the season, it all happened. He attacked Cristiano, and Fergie arranged for his departure at the worst possible time, He had arrived at United too late to take advantage of their treble-winning side, and he was now leaving right as Ronaldo and Rooney began plotting for world domination. The 5 years either side of his time at Old Trafford yielded 8 league titles. However, for the 5 he was there, they only won it once. To make matters worse, that summer, Van Nistelrooy went off to the World Cup and was inexplicably benched in their game against Portugal and watched Ronaldo knock out his country for a second time, prompting him to surprise everyone by retiring from the national team. And in the middle of all this drama, his transfer to Real Madrid was almost overshadowed, and maybe that's why his time there has become so underrated. Despite struggling to fit in among Los Galácticos, famously snitching on Ronaldo by telling Capello that he stank of alcohol, he'd still outscore every striker in the team put together, hitting 33 goals in all competitions once again, showing up 8 matches from the end of the season with Real sitting in 3rd place and he himself sitting 4th in the top scorers table, somehow scoring in 7 consecutive matches, matching Hugo Sanchez for the all-time record, winning 10 points for his team, leaving them tied at the top with Barcelona, but clutching the title regardless on head-to-head, thanks to his 3 goals in El Clásico. Not to mention that, of course, he left Milito, Ronaldinho and Canute in the dust, taking the Pichichi at the last minute. But if that was still enough to take a 6th place in the Ballon d'Or, an ankle surgery cut his 2nd season short, and though he never stopped scoring, opening his 3rd year with 10 goals in 12 matches, then he blew out his knee again, and it was over. He'd play his last ever UCL match that year, closing out his tally with 73 goal contributions in 73 matches, simply the greatest goal scorer in the history of the competition, or at least up till then, because before departing, he'd watched Ronaldo come in as his replacement yet again, this time for a world record fee, and break every single one of his records, while he, after a spell at Hamburg and a failed transfer back to Real, would retire just 2 years later at Malaga.